Welcome back, MTG Joe here. We have the full spoilers for Historic Anthology 7. This is a new anthology set that will be coming to the client in the upcoming days. It'll be coming on the 18th of July, and we're getting an injection of new cards into the format. So I took a look and put together 5 deck lists plus like a minor tweak update to a 6th deck list of some ideas of things I want to try out. Now, I want to preface, I'm not claiming these are going to be the tier 1 decks of the format. Not claiming that they're necessarily the best decks. But it's a general idea to try out the new cards. And the big thing is what we want to do with these is see whether or not things are playable. Transparency aside, I think Rakdos or Red-Black One Ring Shieldred Bowmaster is still the best thing you could be doing in the format. Will likely continue to still be the best thing in the format. But we want to see if these cards in certain shells are either viable or at the very least just fun and kind of a diversity. The nice thing about Historic, while there are clear outliers, I do find the format fairly open in the sense that the more versed you are with certain archetypes, stuff like that, you can still do well. Like I frequently see folks in the Mythics with stuff like Merfolk or random decks that are kind of their pet decks. So keep that in mind as we're going through. So as a quick overview of the actual cards that we got in the format, so we got the Titan cycle, so Sun Titan, Grave Titan, Frost Titan. Sorry about that, my dog wanted to say hello. We got Giver of Runes, a way to give like protection from colorless or from color of your choice till end of turn. So kind of like a Skrelv style effect, but notably not a human either, but could see play in like the human shells. Repeal is usually a card that you'd see historically in like the mono blue Tron. Not necessarily something I would anticipate we see too much. Vendilion Click could be a new card that gets played in the wizard shells. Lets you kind of tempo your opponent by taking a card out of their hand and then drawing. The thing is, it does get picked off by Bowmaster fairly easy, but it does trigger your own Bowmaster if your opponent, because you're forcing your opponent to draw. So interesting card there. Grave Titan, I'm probably going to try out a one of as a top end of Rakdos. I don't know if it'll necessarily stick, but it's a big body that leaves more bodies behind. Echoing Decay, I don't think is going to be very relevant. We have Unearth, which is a card that will feature in a couple decks here, but very cheap kind of reanimate style effect that can also be cycled as well. Lots of powerful 3 CMC or less creatures in the format that we can unearth. Bloodghast is another powerful card. Played quite a bit of this in the past. It's just a card I enjoy. It comes back from your graveyard whenever you play a land, so we'll feature this in a couple different decks. Just kind of going from there. Inferno Titan, another Titan, just like lightning bolts on cast. Tribal Flames is a card that we're going to be featuring in one of the decks, where it basically deals damage equal to the number of basic land types you control for 2 mana. Prime Time, very powerful card in Modern. It does have like a bunch of utility lands that gets used to kind of cheat mana with the Karu bounce lands, but we'll feature it in a Gates deck coming up. Wild Nacatl as like your aggro deck could become a 1 mana 3/3. Acidic Slime, not super relevant, but can be used as kind of a catch-all. Probably more of a Historic Brawl card. Tooth and Nail, 9 mana combo card, but probably more like EDH or Historic Brawl. Bloodbraid Elf, a powerful card in Modern that plays a couple different shells. You can go like the Boomer Jund. You can go like anything just a Cascade at the top end. We'll feature it in one deck. All these cards I think are just for Historic Brawl. You have Mortarpod, Power Stone, and Wayfarer Bauble. Sort of Fire and Ice may see play, but most of these sword cycles haven't been super relevant. Hammer Time is going to be most of the time just trying to cheat in the big equipments. And I think probably the most impactful thing is this Lion cycle. I don't even know what these are called, like in terms of lands, but pay a life to add dual color lands, but then for 1 mana they can be sacrificed to draw cards. So very good. Like you see these get played a lot in Burn or like the low to the ground aggressive decks, just ways like even if you're say a mono color deck, mono red, mono white, these are ways to have additional lands that late game you can just sack to draw cards when you want to be the more aggressor of the format. So we are going to take a look and jump into it. So the first deck up is Historic Domain Tribal Flame Aggro. So we are trying to play all the colors. However, we're predominantly a base Naya green, white, red deck. So I'm doing a split between Esper Sentinel and Wild Nacatl. I'm a little timid about going full 8. These are also 1 toughness. The format is very much defined right now by Bowmaster, being able to ping things. Where we start getting interesting is these 2 drops. We have Territorial Kavu as well as Nishoba Baller. Both get power. In the case of Kavu, toughness as well, equal to the number of basic land types you have. So the Brawler has Trample, where the Kavu allows you to, on attack, either discard a card and draw or exile a card from a graveyard. So these can both be 5 power 2 drops in this deck. We are playing a package of Crucius, Fable the Mirrorbreaker, as well as Jarsel. I went with slightly lower numbers. It could be right still just doing the full 4 of Crucius, in this case to just help you find your top end. The reason I went a little bit lower is because we are trying out 4 Bloodbraid Elves. This allows you to cascade, which is revealing cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land that's lower CMC, and you can cast those instead for free. So I just didn't want to hit too many duplicates of that. So it kind of hits, like you cast a Bloodbraid Elf, you can cast any of these cards for free. Then a single copy of Kenrith, just as a nice mana sink on the top end. You can tutor it by discarding, say, Bloodbraid Elves to get it. And then Leyline Binding, it's a 1 mana in this deck, exile anything if you have Domain available. In terms of the mana base, this was kind of like my first approach of it. We'll have to play some games to see. So the tricky thing is you don't necessarily in an aggro deck want to have too many come into play tap lands, but in order to like properly manage this, you do have to have some Triomes, I find. Otherwise, you're just playing all shock lands, and it's going to be very painful in that respect. Now, you could potentially try like a Death Shadow deck with this, but I think in terms of the color configurations, you do want to be, like maybe you go Jund as the color pair, and then get rid of the bindings and stuff like that, and then just play like all the shock lands, for example. But I'm playing, so we have Spar's Headquarter. I'm using the Triomes to give me at least 2 colors of the Naya color pair, and then a 3rd color, whether it be green, white, blue, green, white, red, or green, white, black. Because we have a couple more copies of black, I do have like the Overgrown Tomb in here as well. Looking into this, we may, because we don't actually cast anything for blue, so I'm just going to adjust this. We'll go up, we're going to cut like one of these and then go up another Indanta Triome, I think, just to have it, but we have too many of these like blue lands. We don't actually cast anything for blue, but that's kind of the idea of the deck there. The next one up is Sultai Dredge, and this is a deck featuring Bloodghast. So the whole concept of this deck is to self-mill yourself for value. So you have Otherworldly Gaze to put cards into your graveyard, Stitcher Supplier, Glimpse the Unthinkable can mill you 10 cards, Satyr Wayfinder, Grizzly Salvage can mill yourselves. The Bloodghast going into the graveyard could come back when you play a land. The Prized Amalgams come back whenever a creature enters from your graveyard. You have Narcomoeba that comes back for free if it gets milled into your graveyard. Haunted Dead can come back by discarding cards from your hand. And then you have Creeping Chill that when you get mill it over, you get to deal 3 to your deal 3 to your opponent, you gain 3 life. Gaining 3 life, you also get Silver Smote back. This is kind of a weak card without the Creeping Chills. It kind of gets stuck in the hand. And now that we have Bloodghast, they cut some copies of it, like a single copy of that. Haunted Dead as well, like the concept of this card's very good, but having too many of them clogs up your hand. And we often don't have excess cards in hand to actually discard to it. A lot of what we're trying to do is put cards into our graveyard from our library. So you don't usually accumulate too much. Also trying out a copy of Eben for the backside to play Throne of the Death. At the beginning of your upkeep, you mill a card, and then we can exile creatures to draw cards. So that's kind of the concept there with the deck. We're also trying out a couple Nurturing Peat lands and Waterlogged Grove, 19 lands. You generally don't need too many lands with this deck. You're trying to maximize your mill ability. From there, we go to Mardu Unearth Greasefang. So nothing like overtly new. It's sense like this is a shell that's been kind of around. The concept here is using Goblin Engineer to find copies of Parhelion and put in the graveyard, or using Crucius to discard any 3-drop to find Parhelion guaranteed, and then you can discard it to the Crucius, or you can discard it to Faithless Looting to kind of get there. The big thing here now is we have Unearth, which can get back any of our creatures in the deck, including the copies of Greasefang, to then reanimate Parhelion. We're also playing Bowmaster in this deck because it's like the best card in the format right now, just really punishing and controlling. And the best way to combat Bowmaster is to have your own Bowmasters. The card I am a little weary of is Faithless Looting into Bowmaster meta. You're just going to ping yourself a lot, but that's something worth trying out. We have Stitcher Supplier that can also help us self-mill. Thoughtseize can also target ourselves in a pinch. So if you have a Parhelion in hand, Greasefang on the field, you can Thoughtseize yourself to put the Parhelion in the graveyard. And then lastly, a Kroxa mixed into there as well. Nothing super fancy with the mana base. Takenuma, some creature lands mixed into there. From there, we go to a fun one. This is Primeval Titan, Mazes End 5-color Gates. So Primeval Titan, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may search your library for up to 2 lands, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. So what we're trying to do is, and you'll see a lot of different lands, we can go with the Mazes End win condition, where you can, if you return Mazes End to your hand, you have 10 or more different unique name gates, you win the game. So we can then tutor up one of each of the various guild gates. We also have some of the additional gates from Baldur's Gates. We have Gate Tomorrowborn that lets us seek a card to hand. And then we also have Baldur's Gate, which adds, it's kind of like Nykthos, but instead of checking devotion, it checks number of gates that you control. So a bunch of different ways. We have a tutorable land in Blast Zone. Some of the channel lands can also be tutored, but they come into play as opposed to your hand. So what we're trying to do with this deck is ramp in a variety of ways. We have 5 of the Boreal Grazer effects. So Boreal Grazer puts an extra land into play, gives us a blocker earlier, same as Kami of Bamboo grows. We have Explore that draws a card, plays an additional land, similar to Growth Spiral, Sorcery versus Instant Speed. Gates Ablaze will be our sweeper in the deck. And then I'm opting for a Karn package as well as One Ring. I should have mentioned these are just kind of general best of one ideas. We can always add a sideboard later, but this is just kind of give you a general thought about the main board. Circuitous Route also helps us find gates to put into play. And then because we are a big mana deck, we have Atraxas on the top end to kind of refill, give us a good beater. There's Guild Summit, the 2 and a blue enchantment that draws cards. When you play Gate, I'm a little weary of going with that card in a format with Bowmaster. The One Ring at least is controllable draw. That plays it off lands, and this also fogs for a turn, which could be relevant to give you an extra turn. And then Karn itself can help us find anything in the sideboard here. Haywire Might doesn't have art apparently, but blows up artifacts, enchantments, Grafdigger's Cage for like graveyard combo stuff. Pithing Needle, activated abilities, Liquid Metal Coating, and Karn. You could blow up your opponent's lands. One Ring at the tutor in the sideboard, Cityscape Lever to blow stuff up, and Portal to Phyrexia. So kind of going for the bigger end, so it's another kind of win condition with the Karns themselves. Then go to Mono Black Vampire. So in addition to Bloodghast being a recurable threat, it's also a vampire. So this deck here is, and I'll preface, there's a lot of different ways to build vampires. You could go Mardu, you can go black-white, you can go black-red, kind of play with that. I think perhaps like going Rakdos and playing Crucius, surprise, surprise, with the Champion of Dusk being the top end, to always find that could be relevant. But the core of the deck, we got some cheap vampires, a single copy of Valentine, Knight of Eben Legion, then the Fatal Push Thoughtseize package. You have Gifted Aetherborn, Lifelink Death Touch. You have Cordial Vampire. Whenever it or another vampire you control dies, you put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. Honorary Vampires, Orcish Bowmaster. Again, this card's so good that you got to play it. But the cool thing with this is with Sorin Impervious Bloodlord, you can just use the plus ability to sack a vampire and Lightning Helix something, and then you play a land and you get it back, so you can kind of have reoccurable blow stuff up. That works as well with Silver Smoke Ghoul by gaining you the 3 life. And then Champion of Dusk draws you a bunch of cards based on the number of vampires you have in play. And then lastly, kind of the honorary, I like I said, I still think Rakdos is the best of the decks, but the Jund deck I was kind of interested in trying out was a little bit more self-mill variant, and then using things like Teaching Occurrence to mill yourself, to use Unearth to buy back like any of your creatures. So Jarsouls, Cruciuses. Jarsoul can also target the Unearth and can buy back another creature for value. Rebuy your Orcish Bowmasters. This deck also features Delighted Halfling, which helps us ramp into turn 2 Crucius or Jarsoul. Kind of get back Croxa for value. You have Shieldred, One Ring. And then I don't know how good it's going to be, but I want to try out Grave Titan in these decks. Sometimes you play Invoke Despair or something like that. Most of the decks don't present many ways to destroy like a 6 CMC creature. You usually can make treasures and stuff like that from Crucius, so you're not naturally having to hit 6 mana. And then this just kind of presents a pretty massive clock on its own and differentiates your threats and lets you go wide in that respect. So that's something I want to try out. We're also trying out a couple Nurturing Peatlands in the deck to give us another way to cycle lands in that regard. But that's it. Let me know what you think, what you're going to be trying out. I didn't really focus too much on the Explorer Anthology for this. Frankly, it's fairly underwhelming, but I think the cards that I'm really excited about are in this respect here. So thanks for watching, everyone. We'll do a similar video for Explorer. I'll try to do as many decks as I can, but again, the drop's been very, very underwhelming, to say the least. But we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Have a great one. Stay safe out there.